Hey, welcome to Ivory GC, the podcast where we explore the experiences, insights, and challenges faced by today's leading general counsels. In this episode, we're joined by Helena Cawley, General Counsel at First Street, a trailblazing company setting the standard in climate risk financial modeling. With a career spanning high-stakes legal work at Aiken Gump and Simpson Thacher, leadership as president of Habit Advisors, promoting equity and inclusion in workplaces, and now steering the legal strategies of a climate risk innovator, Helena brings a wealth of expertise and a unique perspective. We'll dive into her journey, the evolving climate risk landscape, the challenges and opportunities in addressing climate risk, and the trends shaping the future of this critical industry. Helena, thanks for being here today.
Hi, Brian. Nice to be here.
So why don't you start with telling us a little bit about your current role and First Street, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect. Yes, so I'm the general counsel of First Street. I've been with the company for a little over 3 years now. As you mentioned, we're a climate risk financial modeling company. So what that means is we help to quantify the financial impacts of a changing climate. So very simply, we look at what are the impacts of those, 1 in 100-year floods, 1 in 500-year floods, wildfires, hurricanes. Same thing with air quality, hail, heat. We have a bunch of different models. We have some really, really smart scientists and data scientists on our team that actually build these proprietary models that will look at the impact from all of those climate-related weather events on buildings across the United States and soon to be globally as we're building out our global model. And so this way we are able to communicate to homeowners, to businesses, and to the federal government what the financial risks are with respect to a changing climate.
So where does First Street sit in the market? I mean, where do you get your data? Who are your customers? Tell us a bit about your business model.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, it's a really interesting journey for the company. We launched about 8 years ago as a nonprofit organization, and the mission was and still is really, how do we just get more people to care about climate change and to understand their own unique risks of climate change. So really wanting to spread the understanding that this isn't something that is happening very far away or very far off into the future, that this is something that really can and does impact people every day. And I think 8 years ago, that was a harder message to get across. Nowadays, unfortunately, I think a lot more people are seeing that there is a real impact happening today and happening close by. Many of us have experienced it ourselves, unfortunately, but the idea is really to just get people to understand what their risks are, and that with the data and the understanding of those risks, they can make better informed decisions. So that's the kind of mission behind it. We did end up transitioning about a year ago now to a public benefit corporation. So it's a different entity structure, which as the general counsel was a really interesting journey for me to work with some of our outside counsel to spin off and kind of transition the company from a nonprofit to a public benefit corporation. So we did that in order to be able to raise some venture funding to continue to build out our models and bring it from just the United States to actually the global market as well. So that unfortunately reasonably costs a lot of money to do that, and philanthropic donations are great, but in order to really be able to expand, we needed to raise some money. So working on that in 2024, we did 2 rounds of funding, which I can talk about as well, but that was a really interesting and exciting thing to be a part of. But our business model generally is we license the data to really a lot of different verticals that have a use for climate data. One of our biggest is financial institutions. So we work with a lot of the largest banks that need the data to understand the risks to their loan portfolio. So they want to know, where are there greater risks of homes defaulting or people defaulting on their mortgages as a result of climate impacts. We work with the federal government, who uses our data for anything from resilience planning to also understanding which areas are going to be most at risk in the future. And then I would say the last piece is for individuals, any homeowner or somebody who's in the market to buy a home. We're partnered with all of the largest real estate portals. So if you look on like Zillow or Realtor or Redfin or Homes.com and you're in the market to buy a new house, you'll see under the environmental section, you'll see our data is there to show what the risks are to that specific home. And we do see that with that information, people are choosing 25% less risky homes when they go to buy a new home. So they are using this data and making informed decisions as a result, which is, what we set out to do. So feel good about that.
That's great. And where are you getting the data? What are your data sources?
Yeah, so it's a combination of publicly available sources from the government, but also some data that we license from third parties. And then we build all of the models in-house. So they're all of our own proprietary models that we build with those inputs that we get from NASA and NOAA and U.S. Forest Service and a whole host of different sources from that are federally available or free to access, and then some data that we also license.
Got it. And so tell us a bit about, you said the company's been around for about 8 years. How big, how many employees, and I guess company-wide, and then also within the legal department specifically?
Yeah, so right now we're at about, I want to say about 68 employees, which is a big growth from where we were even this time last year. We went from about 25 to about 68 in a year as a result of our transition to public benefit corporation. We really expanded our science teams, our software development, our product team, and our sales team as well. The one place we did not grow into quite yet is our legal team. So I am a legal team of one. We're actually a little early compared to many other startup venture-backed companies to have a full-time in-house counsel. You'll often see that happen sort of more around like a Series B raise. But we've kind of always had in-house counsel, at least for the last 4+ years. I actually came on. There was another general counsel in place, a woman named Angela, who was an amazing lawyer and good friend of mine who hired me. And then she moved on to something else. And so I became the general counsel. But it's quite rare to have in-house at this stage, but something that we really do need, and I think is a good thing to have a full-time legal person because of a lot of the responsibilities range from corporate governance, board meetings, compliance, making sure that all of that is up to date and is being monitored. But also we have a SaaS product that we license out. And so all of the contracts, all of the agreements that we do, and all of the IP work as well, I manage all of that. So it really kind of runs the gamut.
Yeah, great. So we'll get into your day-to-day and also a bit of more about the company. But can you tell us, you have a history in a similar industries. Can you tell us about the last, your legal career and how you came to be where you are?
Yeah, I have had a lot of lives in my career. Actually, so I went to law school at NYU and graduated. I worked for a couple years at Simpson Thacher as a tax and a corporate associate. And then I moved over to Aiken Gump, another law firm based in New York with offices all over. But worked as an energy corporate lawyer, so both renewable and your kind of typical oil and gas, but really any corporate work, so M&A, securities, and things like
Yeah.
that. And then I kind of made a total U-turn, and I left in 2011 or 2012, and I actually co-founded a gym. So we
Oh, wow.
had a brick and mortar gym. Yeah, like
Yeah.
this was
Cool.
kind of when fitness studios were sort of popping up everywhere. You had a lot of Soul Cycle, a lot of Barry's Boot Camp, if you're familiar.
Sure.
And so I and two business partners, we launched a gym in Manhattan, and I ran that as the CEO and the kind of in-house counsel, which we had it for about 8 years, which was an amazing
Nice.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I moved on to president of a company called Habit Advisors, which did corporate anti-sexual harassment trainings, DEI trainings, and things like that. We started that in 2019. And the idea really being, what's out there in the sort of anti-harassment training world is very, you know, cold or monotone, and it doesn't really get into the meat of kind of what are the underlying issues and what are the things that companies really need to be mindful of and to really discuss. And so we really wanted to be in the room and looking at each other in the eye and having kind of real and
Yeah.
frank conversations about it and not just checking a box and watching a video.
Yeah.
Um, which was a great program, which I really loved doing. Unfortunately, then it became COVID, and nobody was in an office able to be in a conference room together, looking
Yeah.
each other in the eye for quite some time. So things didn't quite pan out on that end, and we did have to, go in a different direction. I ended up, as I'm sure many people experienced, personal loss from COVID. My dad actually died of COVID
Sorry.
in 2020. Yeah, thank you. And my stepmom as well. And so I took a little bit of time in the wake of that. Obviously, I had two young kids who were not able to be in school. So about a year after that, I started looking for something full time again, and I found First Street, and it was a very quick decision on my part of just like, this is an amazing company. I definitely
Yeah.
want to be part of this. And yeah, I haven't looked back. It's been a wonderful experience.
That's great. So before we started recording, we talked a little bit about the difference between ESG and kind of climate risk, financial modeling. Can you talk about the distinction a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think ESG has just become such a tough acronym, a tough phrase lately that has a lot of loaded meaning. So I just wanted to kind of clarify a little bit of ESG as a corporate strategy or initiative is still very much, I think, at the forefront of many of our clients' minds, but it's kind of
Hmm.
taken on a different dynamic where it's not necessarily, hey, how are we, uh, um, you know, putting money behind ESG efforts or ESG investing or some of those, ESG funds that have popped up that haven't necessarily panned out, or greenwashing that's kind of gotten in the way. But really what it's become now is this kind of understanding of your climate risks and
Yeah.
understanding it from a business perspective of what is the actual financial impact on not having a strategy in place to know what your risks are from a changing climate. So it that does still include at the managing level, sort of
Yeah.
having a governance strategy in place to know about these climate risks. But it's just kind of taken on a little bit of a different dynamic than what you kind of typically think about with ESG, and sort of avoiding that loaded word.
Yeah. It's an interesting space. I think an interesting time because I mean, going back to the day one business school question of what should be the motivation for growing companies, and you think driving shareholder value, and ESG often gets associated with doing the right thing, which is also great. But
Mhm.
I think we're seeing the kind of convergence of the two where doing the quote unquote right thing also impacts the bottom line and drives shareholder value. And so kind of transitioning from them being separate to really being one and the same is just has been interesting to follow just from a an onlooker's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we can talk a little bit about if you'd like, but it's also being driven by regulation in many ways. It's a little bit of a purgatory right now in the United States to see kind of what will happen at the federal level of whether there will be climate-related regulation in place. But there are states that are taking the initiative now, California being the first one to really put into law the fact that companies of a certain size need to know their climate risks and they need to be able to disclose them so that people can make informed decisions about whether those companies, um, are at risk or as you mentioned, kind of driving that shareholder value. So California being the first one in the US, but then globally, there's a lot of climate disclosure regulation that is already in place that's affecting large businesses around the world.
Let's talk about that for a bit. I mean, what do those regulations look like, both, at the state level and also internationally, and how is First Street really taking a role in helping those that need to comply?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very early days right now. The companies that need to report on their climate risks are still in those early stages of figuring out exactly what data they need and how to actually package up these reports.
Yeah.
So we'll see a lot more of that coming clear in the next couple of years as the more and more companies get subject to these regulations. But for right now, we're really seeing it in kind of two main ways. One is on the physical risk side. So what are the physical climate risks that you as a company face? And that could be your brick and mortar stores, if you have retail presence. It could be your supply chain. It could be your
Yeah.
headquarters. What are those risks? And that's what we really do at First Street is help people understand their physical climate risks. So what is the impact of a flood or a wildfire? How likely are your assets to be impacted by those events? And then the second piece of it is kind of on this transition risk side. So what are the costs of transitioning to a lower emissions world?
Hmm. Hmm.
So what will that mean for whether you need to change the way that you create your widgets, or you need to comply with certain regulations that say you have to change, certain things about your business. And so what is that going to cost, and what are the risks associated with transitioning to a lower emissions world? And so that those are kind of the two components that make up the California laws and the European laws, the CSRD and TCFD as well.
It's interesting for Ivory. We do have a client that is owned by a Canadian public company, and we're helping them go through the process now of collecting the data that they have, utilities bills, other kind of information around energy consumption that the company accounts for. Primarily, that information goes into a SaaS platform that calculates emissions levels, and
Yep.
we're seeing that we really are seeing that more and more. I'm not sure if it's primarily driven, from a transparency perspective
Mhm.
and then from a regulatory compliance perspective, but it is certainly something that's
Yeah.
coming up more and more.
Yeah, exactly. And so our platform, what we can allow companies to do is they can upload their portfolio of assets. If they have, 100 locations across the country or 1,000 or whatever it may be, you put those locations into our platform, and we can show you across your entire portfolio what those risks look like. And then that will, be able to be exported into a report that you can use to comply with these regulations. But more importantly, kind of drive value for the business as well. And so you can see, you can play around with it and see, well, if I divest from these assets or if I, move into this location, how does that change my tail risk? And really use it to understand and create valuable strategy within the business.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the conversion from a nonprofit to a public benefit corporation. Talk
Mhm.
about what that legal process was, how you managed it, what was involved, kind of what the start looked like, and what
Mhm.
what the the outcome looked like.
Yeah. Let me try to think back to all of the things that it entailed. I mean,
Yeah,
it was definitely a big process that doesn't happen that often, right? It's not, I mean, there are certainly, I think OpenAI is another example that transitioned, but there aren't that many precedents to go off
yeah,
of transitioning from a nonprofit to a for-profit. But it did involve, which was really nerdy, exciting for me, a reverse triangular merger, which you might recall from law school. And I couldn't believe that I was like really doing a reverse triangular merger in real life because I remember it from law school. But it was like super fun to do
yeah,
that. And
yeah.
everybody was laughing about how excited I got about it. But we did end up basically creating a new co, right? And then that new co was the Public Benefit Corporation, and we spun off a subsidiary of the nonprofit that had all of the IP and all of the contracts and basically the operating subsidiary. We spun that off into NewCo, and then the VCs that invested in the company invested in that NewCo, and now we have a subsidiary that kind of sits under there
Got it.
as well. But the nonprofit still exists actually and is kind of a research based nonprofit now that still has a little bit of a stake in that company. But what was really interesting was we went from when you're a nonprofit, you don't really have any owners of the business, right? We had donors, but there's no equity in the business. So when we transitioned, we were actually able to create stock options for all of our employees, and now we've all been able to, become owners in the business, and that's been a really exciting thing for us to be able to offer now.
So how are you managing your cap table? Are you using a tool like Carta or
Yeah, we use
talk?
Carta.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, okay. And is that process been pretty seamless for you, or did you manage that internally and it's gone easily?
It was a learning curve, I think, of
Yeah,
just keeping up with, fully diluted and the
yeah,
strike
sure.
price and
Yeah,
getting, what are those called? 409A
409As, right?
valuations and all that, which we had to do twice because we did the spin-off in February of last year, where we raised money in an initial round. And then actually in our first board meeting, the board kind of said to us, hey, this roadmap sounds great, but like, what if you had more money, could you go faster? And we said, took some time to think about it and said, yeah, I think we could do this faster. And so we ended up very quickly thereafter doing a series A1 that kind of
Uh-huh.
piggybacked off of our initial series. So we first spun out and raised in February, and then we did an A1 round in July. So it was like really
Yeah,
quickly. So we had to do a second 409A because we raised at a higher valuation very quickly. So that was also an interesting and big learning experience for me. But so learning kind of the dynamics that go into changing the strike price and all of
yeah,
that good stuff. And then so we had to kind of rejigger all of the options and things like that. But yeah, Carta has been a very easy tool to work with and manage.
yeah,
And our outside counsel will work with the law firm Cooley as our outside counsel, and they helped us get that set up. But then yeah, we manage it internally with their
yeah.
help.
Great. So can you provide an overview of the climate tech industry's current landscape and then the most significant challenges and opportunities in the space?
Yeah, kind of, what we've been talking about so far. I mean, I think there are like I mentioned, sort of the two main areas. I guess there's three really. That physical risk, what we do, the transition risk to kind of a lower emissions economy, and then this carbon accounting, which is kind of what I think we're talking about, where you look at, what are the emissions of my building and kind of
Mm.
tracking all of that. So those are sort of the three main areas where we're starting to see growth in companies that are providing that data to as a service. Right. So there's a number of different ways. We ourselves, we license the data through bulk exports, but we also have hazard maps that you can integrate into your own tool if you have like a GIS software. And then we also have this SaaS platform. So we're seeing it kind of come up in a number of different ways. I think a lot of the carbon accounting is through SaaS tools as well. Um, and again, kind of from a number of different drivers. The first is invest, really sort of trying to create a more valuable company. So a lot of our clients are doing it because they see that with this information, they are able to make informed decisions that will increase the value of their business
Yeah.
and avoid loss.
Yeah.
Equally important. And then another driver being regulation, another driver being kind of reputation and knowing that, as a big company, a lot of these are public companies that want to report in their 10Ks and 10Qs that they have this data, that they're monitoring it, that it's part of their strategy,
Yeah.
because it's important from a reputation standpoint. And yeah, so those are kind of the main drivers.
Yeah. And what does your day-to-day look like as general counsel at First Street, and how's the nature of the climate tech industry influence your current role?
Yeah, so it's a lot. We're 68 people, but we're still, a small company by many measures. And so we have to wear a lot of different hats. So I would say a day-to-day involves a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But, managing the governance and like I talked about, kind of the stock option plans and the board meetings and the
Yeah.
all of that goes into just keeping a business running and compliant and making sure that we're legally keeping everything running properly.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of IP that goes into it. So we have two patents for our models. We have trademarks for all of our a lot of things within our business as well. So we work with outside counsel on that as well, IP counsel, but I help manage all of that from in-house. When we were doing our raises, of course, there was like a ton of diligence that the VCs were doing. So I helped manage all of that and work on the agreements. But a lot of it is spending time negotiating our SaaS agreements. So I do
Yeah.
a lot of license agreements right now with our clients, data licensing agreements for our SaaS tool.
Yeah. And so what unique legal challenges do you face working in a field that intersects with climate science, data, and policy?
Yeah, I mean, so we have a quite large climate science team and data science team. So there's a lot of data that is very confidential that we
Yeah.
create that is very valuable to us. So making sure that our data stays protected and that within our license agreements, we know that the data is not going to be used in a way that could be um, you know, risky to us or just making sure that it stays protected, stays proprietary. So that's a big
Yeah.
legal challenge, I would say. And this is, a new-ish field, right? A lot of the models that we're building have really never been done before at this scale.
Hmm.
And so just helping people through that journey of like these unprecedented models that we're building and making sure from the IP side, like I mentioned, we have patents that really, haven't existed before. So navigating the trademarks and the patents process is like very complicated and different. And it's like a whole language that as a corporate lawyer, not an IP lawyer, I don't even understand, half the language that our outside counsel is saying. But that's
Yeah.
been another big challenge that we really need to be on top of. Um, and yeah, so I
Yeah.
think those are a couple of the examples.
How about from a litigation standpoint? Are there emerging risks or trends in litigation related to climate risks that you're monitoring?
Knock on wood, we haven't seen too much by way of litigation at this point. We are navigating this world of state and federal regulation that does experience some litigation. So both the SEC's disclosure regulation and the California regulations, they are in litigation right now. So
Yeah.
we are, following that and staying on top of what's happening there. But luckily, yeah, we haven't been involved too much in litigation.
Reflecting on your career, what moments stand out as key successes, either at First Street or in some of your prior roles?
Yeah. Let me think. Uh, I would say, um, well, this is an interesting one. When I was at Aiken Gump, I speak French from, learning it in school and spending a year there actually between college and law school. So we had an opportunity to actually go to the Democratic Republic of Congo for a month where they speak French and helping with some legal work on a mine. It was a copper and cobalt mine that was needed, our counsel in the Congo. So that one definitely stands out as an
Yeah.
interesting experience of
Yeah.
living in the Congo for a month. It was a really exciting and cool experience, but definitely different. So
Yeah.
helping, work through that, that deal was really exciting. So I think that one stands out the most. And
Yeah.
then, honestly, getting us through the Series A and the spinoff that I did last year was a really big highlight of my career legally
Yeah.
so far.
And your work at Habit Advisors, how has that influenced your approach to leadership and, fostering equity within the teams that you lead today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I dealt with a lot of different personalities through that experience, both internally, but also with all of the different companies that I would, go and sit in and talk to and lead these anti-harassment DEI training sessions. And so really giving people space to be themselves and to understand that there are a lot of different ways of running a team and a lot of different ways of communicating across an organization, and that there may not be just one right way, but giving people space to really do work in the way that gets the best out of them, that works for them, and being open to that and not necessarily dictating exactly how people work, but letting them work in a way that is best for them.
Yeah.
So I take that now. I have a legal team of one, so I give myself that space to work in a way that works for me.
Yeah.
But also across the organization, I am part of the leadership team at First Street, and so just being a resource for people, and making sure that our culture stays positive and stays a place that we want to go into and every day, and people that we want to work with, and in a way that we all feel good about the work that we're doing.
Yeah. Do you have a head of HR at First Street, or are
Yeah.
you okay? So
I did run HR as well for a while before we had somebody full time, but we do have two people in HR now that
yeah.
that help us. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what inspires you to continue advocating for, climate risk, financial modeling and leading legal strategies in this industry?
Well, this is kind of cliche, but it's my kids.
Yeah.
I tell them that I work for like an environmental company, so they think I pick up garbage for a living, which I get, but but I love that. But it's really about the fact that I care a lot about having this planet survive, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um, having my kids have a place that isn't going to be burdened by frequent floods and frequent wildfires and, really bad air quality days where they're not able to go outside, and just some of the things that really worry me about the direction that our planet is heading in. So, uh, I'm not a scientist, but I get to work with them every day and I get to see the cool innovations that are happening in our world right now. And it's a way to kind of do my part to help this planet survive.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's a critical time. I mean, as we're recording this, we're in the midst, or hopefully on the tail end of the wildfires out in the Los Angeles community. Our heartfelt thoughts
Yeah,
go to those folks. So, I mean,
yeah,
there's just if it's not, it seems to be so much more frequent, or we come across
yeah,
the practical
yeah,
implications of this that
yeah. And
it's timely.
one of the things that I've learned from my science colleagues is that unfortunately the train has kind of already left the station for the next 30 years of how we're going to see these things continue to grow in severity and frequency.
Yeah,
So not a lot of what we do today is going to change tomorrow, but after the next 30 years is really when we can make positive changes. And so having an understanding of what those risks are, you can make better choices and you can help influence and hopefully prevent some of the worst outcomes. So
yeah,
we're right now, we've sort of said goodbye to 1.5 degrees of warming, and that's definitely done
yeah,
and no way of turning around. We're pretty close to, saying goodbye to 2.5, 3 degrees of warming, but we still have a chance of avoiding kind of some of that worst warming of, 4 or 5 and up degrees. And it depends on what we do now. And without the data to know what it will look like, what those risks will look like, you can't make informed decisions. And so
yeah.
having that data is kind of our small way of trying to help
Yeah.
influence that.
That's great. We like to end these episodes with a piece of advice you'd give to a junior or rising lawyer who wants to be, where you are today. What would you have told yourself, back in the start of your career, and what do you try to stick by?
Yeah, I mean, dig into kind of like some of the nerdy, exciting things that you like. Every job has things that are a little bit more mundane and a little bit more exciting. And if you can find some things that you really get a kick out of, then you're in the right place.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like doing that reverse triangular merger was like, oh, I learned about that, and it was kind of like nerdy, exciting. But every day I go in and I don't love every single thing that I have to do every day, but there's enough that really excites me that I know I'm in the right job. So if you can
Yeah.
find those things, then you're in the right place.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the episode. Wish you all the best,
Yeah.
and it was great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It was nice to be here.